nothing. Just a wobbly. No, I was just told that.
The practice is so much about integrity, honesty, sincerity. You know, that's actually what I practice in a sense when I, going out to perform. And of course, that's completely counter to what most performance or the pressure of performance makes you want to do, because it makes you want to, suddenly become someone that you're not. Of course, you've got to be something better than you are, because of course you're not good enough as you are, and so on. But I feel it's actually turning that completely around and showing the depth that we are.
We train ourselves to have very disciplined coordination skills, for example, until such point that those skills become automatic and they become part of our habitual pattern, and we can add on another layer. And part of what improvisation is trying to do is pare all that away so that we become more conscious of our habits, and therefore we can open up other choice. It can be a mask. Training, or what we term as technique, can sometimes be a mask.
I had only really felt the constriction of forms, throughout life almost, and then also in dance forms. Those forms were, developed by certain people, so why should I just conform to that form? It never made any sense to me. I mean, it was fine as a training, but then that was it. You're supposed to go out there and do that, and that never made any sense. When I first saw Steve Paxton, Lisa Nelson improvising, it was absolutely stunning, because I saw two people right there opening themselves to this risk, I suppose, to just walk out there with nothing but themselves. It was so human, what I perceived. They weren't hiding anything, they weren't trying to pretend to be anybody. So I saw this incredible dialogue.
As a viewer, what draws me to improvisation is the transparency, is that you're not seeing the material itself, you're seeing the person. And the material is there as a vehicle just for you to be able to see the person.
I'm not interested in dance being some kind of separate thing from my life, but I'm actually interested in learning about life. I've always been interested in learning about life. And I realized that this form was really a vehicle at that point in time to start to learn about myself, about my relationship with others. And in a sense, you'd say, well, what's that to do with performance? But in a sense, I've always felt, because I watched that performance and it had such a tremendous effect on me, there must have been something extremely valid in that, and I've always trusted in that. I very rarely know how to prepare, but the only thing I do know is that my preparation is not just what I do, right before that performance, but I know it's actually the 25 years that I've been practicing this form. And there's a wealth of knowledge that's built up through that process. And then taking that into performance, I would say that you become kind of the creator, in a sense, in the moment. In the classes, I really do teach through example. Big! I'm really showing them what's possible in the body when you go into this work. So I am always, in a sense, performing. To be honest, right, and this is tricky, it's a tricky area, because what I feel in myself, that I become a channel. So when I walk out into a space, I feel that in some way I'm actually channeling something. That's my sense of what I'm actually doing, is to walk out there and be absolutely, as much as I can, available. It's a particular kind of very intense concentration and focus. And it's almost, and this is going to sound again kind of weird, it's almost like a trance state. You go into a particular state, but it's not that you leave in that state, but you become more present, more aware. And that's the goal. After a certain point, you start to feel it when you move in this way, because your own body is starting to be attuned to space. space being around us, but space also being within us. I work through space, but if I come actually into contact with you, I'm not focused on, oh, I've hit a form here, but actually the space within the form. You know what I mean? And that's a very different. It totally changes something in the brain.
Everything is relative and everything is in flow and nothing is fixed and static, and so to be creating art forms that reflect that in a way, or as artists just to be involved in processes that reflect that, and that our intuition can make the best decisions in certain situations, whereas what we've traditionally trained is only our rational mind or traditionally valued. It opens up the palette of what choreography can be.
It's not that you just indulge, and I think improvisation has been that, and I think it has a bad name because of that. But if you're really working, you're always keeping perspective on what's happening. You know what I mean? And that's almost what keeps the channel kind of open. As soon as you lose that perspective, you're lost, really. You're really lost. But if you can you develop a sense of humour about the human condition and everything else, which is brilliant. And there's an irony in there, which allows, I think, the picture to emerge, or whatever it is, whatever that improvisation is, to emerge and to grow and to expand.
That is, in a sense, I think, the most challenging form of performance, because you're having to draw on all of the knowledge you have, but in an instant. In movement art, one could say, rather than dance, that's really about refining the intelligence of our human behaviour. And seems to me we've been evolving our intelligence as if it was only in the front brain, and we haven't turned that back into our own organism. We're sort of evolving out of our own organism.
And you get people that practice this form and that are like egomaniacs. I mean, they're not really practicing the form, because it's much more than that. And it has to do with our place on the planet here and what we're doing. And yeah, I've never been able to separate dancing from, because it's the way that I live on the planet. I mean, it's the way that I've found I can live on the planet, and actually really live has been through that. And a lot of the people that find dance, I think they feel that, and then they go through this training which completely destroys a lot of that inspiration that they find in themselves, which I think it's a crime. I actually think it's a crime, and I think it's destroying dance, to some degree, because I think people are looking for something else now. I just feel it, because things are getting so bad, that many people are starting to go, well, wait a minute, what do we need, for life to have more meaning, really.
When I trained as a dancer, I was very drawn to improvisation as a performance and as an activity. But when I moved into wanting to make work for the screen and started training in video production and filmmaking and so on, I really took a very different approach. I was very fixed on the idea that you had to rethink everything for the screen, to forget about really what happened in a live performance context, and really to think anew about the screen and about what that did to space and shape and so on. So I was very rigorous in storyboarding, and I had very specific ideas about framing and so on. But what I quickly began to notice is that in my attempt to try and create the perfect image and the frames that I wanted to use in editing, there was definitely a loss of a performance element with the dancers. Well, really a loss of spontaneity. I felt that whilst the shapes and the forms and the textures of the images were right, there was a performance that was gone. It was actually by accident, in fact, that I discovered that improvisation was maybe something to start exploring. I was doing a particular project which was very set, very storyboarded, working with a choreographer on location. But every day we decided that for 20 minutes we would have a kind of free-for-all where the camera and the dancers were moving. And I actually, even then, gave the camera person some sort of direction, but very much, it was more like a score for them and a score for the dancers. And at the end of this particular project, when we looked at everything, all the material that we had, we realised that those improvised moments were the ones that had an energy and something really that grabbed our attention. And I've really explored it in many different ways now. I've explored it in ways where the dancers are improvising, but as I say, the camera has a very fixed trajectory or way of moving. I've explored it in ways where both camera and dancer have fixed or have scores or given ideas or given a set of premise within which to work. And I've also used improvisation when there's actually set choreography, but I'm giving the camera a more fluid set of directions. There's often this tension between what I choose to look at with the camera and then choices that are made in editing. And there's often a tension between myself and the choreographer where they're feeling like, oh, well, we need to see the whole body or we need to see everybody in the space. But what's been has really given me a lot of confidence this week is that the performers have really responded well to that idea of a single eye taking you into the movement, where that decision-making process is actually seen as a positive thing as opposed to a negative thing. It's not a loss, it's actually a gain, it's a way into the movement. There is something that I'm doing all the time, which is going between the frame, which is obviously the most important thing, because ultimately that's what people are going to see, what's in the frame and how that is shaped, and then my physical relationship to people. And I can sense that that's very, very important. I'm hand-holding the camera a lot, and I'm moving in and out of the movement, and I'm kind of quite confidently ignoring some things and going with certain things, knowing that there are other things going on. And I'm also aware of the fact that the sound is picking up those things. So there is that dimension is there. It's not that that they don't exist. They're very important. The sound's being picked up, but also the way that the other performers are relating to people who are off screen is, I think, really important in terms of the space being alive. It's almost as though the level of composition that's going on amongst the performers really reads for me. I can immediately pick that up. I never feel like I'm finding a moment that's kind of unconsidered or just kind of thrown away. I want people to be watching my dance films like that they're really that their pulse is racing and they're really they're in there with the dancers. That's my aim. The repetition of certain things confirms something to me, which is if you start to go down that route, you actually very quickly begin to lose the thing that is so exciting about improvisation. Because what was happening for me yesterday is very occasionally I thought, now, if I had just started around the other side, this whole thing could have evolved, yeah? And I thought, oh, that would be so clever and nice. But actually what happened is that instead of being absolutely in the moment and responding you know, with all this information that we've, you know, talked about having from all the experience of having done this, instead of that, I found what I was actually trying to do is recreate something, and then it just didn't have the thing. You have to think about the shoot as the performance. You know, that is where it's happening. If it doesn't happen there, you can't make it happen somewhere else. You can do amazing things with editing. But I think even if you loop it like we do, you know, take fragments, it still matters to me what's kind of behind it, which is kind of weird because all you're talking about is kind of light and pixels and things, but still the human performance really speaks.